Hello, welcome to Full Time Score with TC Ramokwase. This is episode number 7, and welcome to it again. Today's episode, we're going to have two parts divided into two, so we're going to have two separate videos. We're going to have the first video, we're going to be so focusing on Sundowns versus Alhy, which took place on Saturday at the FNB Stadium. And then we're going to be doing a part 2, which will be on the Bafana squad announcement, what I think about it. I'm going to go through the squad, what I think about the players selected, the differences, and what could be done differently, and just give my own opinion and own analysis on the matter. Right, without wasting any further time, let's get into the Alhy versus Sundowns match. Before that, let's waste time. Of course, you can catch me up on my Instagram page. I am TC Ramokwase, Ramokhose. I put up videos or put up reels, and then you can maybe get a link from that to YouTube. So yeah, basically that's what we do. Anyway, back to it now. Alhy versus Sundowns, FNB Stadium, Saturday afternoon. Now, it's one of those games that now have started to take a lot more attention or attract a lot more attention in South African football, possibly in African football. I mean, the profile of Alhy speaks for itself. I think, 11-time Champions League winners, and a dominant force in African football. They were voted the club of the century at some point. I mean, that was just not just from an African perspective, but from a whole perspective of the world. They're right up there amongst, in my opinion, the Real Madrids of the world. So the profile of the match takes a huge attention because Alhy, number one. Number two, Mamelodi Sundowns' profile has grown over the last 8 or so years in African football. They've beaten Alhy 5-0 in a match at some point, and they've been there in and about quarterfinal, semi-final. They won it once. So Sundowns' profile on the African continent is actually big. Most people work so hard to deny it, but the reality is Sundowns have done so brilliantly in the African continent that it's hard to actually deny it. And I think you'd be not very smart to be like Sundowns is not as big as they think. They are quite big. And of course, we have to talk about the previous result in Cairo, Sundowns beating Alhy, the first team to actually do it since 2016 in the group stages of CAF Champions League. Sundowns did it 2 weeks back, Thapelo Mrana scoring in the 84th minute to give Alhy a win, not Alhy, but Sundowns a win. So Alhy come to South Africa this week. They're trying to get some revenge. They're trying to show some pride because this Sundowns team, it's like the younger brother challenging the older brother a bit in terms of trophies and success. So obviously Alhy want to come back and put Sundowns in their place. That's more the mentality that they look to carry. And I have to say, football is a funny game because last week I did a video on the Kaizer Chiefs and Pirates game, and I spoke about how local coaches, in particular, the Pirates coaches, look tactically inept. I mentioned that the Sundowns coaches usually look very good tactically. And Saturday, I was curious when I saw the starting 11. I think it's around about 2:30, just after 2 o'clock. Got onto my phone, I saw the starting lineup, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And it was very interesting, actually, extremely interesting to note who was who and who played where and how. First of all, I picked up that Mtobi Mvala was in with Andile Jali, right? There's no Rivaldo Kutsia. So I thought, okay, how are they going to set this up? Because usually Sundowns play a 3-4-3. 3-4-3 being, yes, they may have two holding midfielders, but the one goes into a defensive position. They split the centre backs. The centre backs will then cover, obviously, the spaces. And then, of course, they have wing backs instead of your normal full backs. But this one looked a bit different because I'm seeing Brian Oyango, Hoshin the Rook, okay. And then I'm seeing a left back, Lalake, right back, Koliso Mudau. And then I'm seeing these two midfielders, these two very much similar type midfielders. None of them, okay, maybe Jali, but they're not as efficient with the ball at their feet as you would say Rivaldo Kutsia is. Jali is good. I think he's as good as anyone. But compared to Kutsia in terms of what Kutsia does when they play a 3-4-3, I don't think Jali is suited for that. So I wondered how they're going to set up. And I'm seeing Hashim Domingo as well. And my mind just went straight to they're going to set up a 4-3-3. Morena up front, Shalio through the middle, Zwane on the left. I wasn't sure how that would have worked, but that's what my mind gave me. Until the game started and you start seeing Sundowns set up a 4-2-3-1. 4-2-3-1 meaning up front is Themba Zwane. Just behind him, they had a double 10, which is Hashim Domingo left, Shalile right, Morena. Two sitting midfielders, that's Mvala Jali, and then of course the back four, which I've already mentioned. And that showed me something. It showed me a tactical awareness, tactical fluidity, tactical adaptation. Sundowns knew they had to take the game as the host team. They knew they had to take the game to Alhy in this case. And they set up in a way that was looking to confuse Alhy, which I think did, because Alhy's defense was at 6s and 7s. When Sundowns had the ball in that final third, either one, Domingo or Tembazwane would drop more or less into that pocket of space into that number 10. This is the advantage of having two number 10s. They would drop either one, and the other one would go into the box. And whoever had the ball had so much options ahead of him. He had a double overlap with one side with Koliso Muda, also a pacey player, and he has Tapelo Moren. On the left, he would have a pacey player, craftsman in terms of finishing, Peter Shalulile coming in, and he would have the double overlap with Alhy. Whoever had the ball at his feet had four options, four or five attacking options, one through the middle, two through the sides. And Alhy looked at 6s and 7s. And I never thought I'd say that about an Alhy defense, especially under Pitso, because Pitso's always been a very conservative coach, very pragmatic. But on Saturday, that first half, they absolutely struggled to handle what Sundowns was offering them in attack. The only criticism I'll ever have of Sundowns in that game was the fact that they missed so many goals. They should have scored 2-3 up by halftime. I was chatting with a Sundowns fan that I know from my university days, and we were having the same sentiment. I'm like, this game could have been over. Should have been at least 2 up, because Alhy didn't look like they were going to score the whole game, actually. So in the first half, I was like, hey, this should have been over, It should have been over, but Sundowns somehow missed chances in the first half. I mean, the goal they scored came off a corner, and that's something none of us expected when you consider how well adapted the North African teams generally are as compared to us. They are very good in the air. A lot of goals from Alhy come from set pieces, transitional play. They're not like us, where we can put the ball on the ground and look to create using the ball with the space. They usually rely on the transitions and the technical play in terms of the head, direct football. Someone will cross a ball, someone will head. But the ball on the ground stuff is not normally what North African countries normally seek to do. So I was surprised. Sundowns take a lead through a corner. Good for them. Congrats. 1-0 up. They're in control of the match. Alhy aren't getting any joy. They've got Sherif. They've got Pesitao. They've got behind him, they've got Fatih. They were also playing a 4-2-3-1 type system. They've got Dieng, again, him and Jali battling it out, cancelling each other out. Mvala having a good game, marking Fatih out of the match as well, making sure he cuts the direct supply to Mohamed Sherif. Pesitao not allowed into the game too much as well. Alhy doing what Alhy does best, my opinion, probably the best left back in African football. Closing down Pesitao, not giving him enough space, coming back, backtracking, winning the ball, going forward, making crosses, and executing well. And that's why Sundowns are where they are, because so many of their players walk onto a football pitch and they know what to do and how to do it. In American football, they use the term execution. If you watch NFL or even NBA, you hear the word execution. And by that, in sport terms, it simply means get onto the field, do what you want, do what you're supposed to do, what you plan to do, what you train to do, what you prepared to do. And that's exactly what Sundowns did on Saturday. They had a prepared plan. Clearly, they showed they studied this team. They studied the team, they studied the habits, because there's actually a difference between watching football and studying football. What we do as fans, when we play Betway, we watch football. But coaches and other people should study football. They should be able to see certain things that a normal person like myself and maybe the viewer you are watching can't really see, And once you study football, it's like reading and studying. People read a lot of books, but then they wouldn't be able to tell you, hey, this is what happened, or answer a test in some cases about the book they read. But when you study, you are able to study, you're able to recite and answer questions about what you studied. So there should be a difference. And with Sundowns coaches, it was quite clear they studied Alhy. They studied tapes. They came back also with the previous, from the previous match they played and experience they had in Cairo. Probably like, okay, this is how we're supposed to approach the game. This is how we're going to win. And this is what we're supposed to do to get a positive result. And they did that. They executed off the field. They executed on the field. And we can simply just say congratulations to them for that. Now, In terms of individual performances, I have to super say I was impressed with Brian Oyango, someone who takes a lot of stick on social media from Mamelodi Sundowns fans and fans of other clubs, and he shut them down. He shut down Pesita, he shut down Mohamed Sharif. Little sniffs of chances, he was in there. Any ball in the air, heading away. And that's great. Rushen Duruk, again, showing to me why he's one of the best in the whole continent, one of the best centre backs in the country. I think he's the main centre back in the country right now. He should definitely be the main guy for the Bafana Bafana setup, because the way he just performed against top quality sides in 2 games, that should tell you something about how good he actually is as a centre back. Then we can move on to another guy who really impressed me, Mtobi Mvala. There are certain players that are suited for certain styles of football or certain matches or certain opponents. And for me, Mtobi Mvala, every time he plays from an African context, he's very well suited for this, because Mvala is just a guy who does his job. Nothing fancy. He keeps it so simple. He's a midfield destroyer. He will win the ball, defend, shut down a player, win or tackle, hit a tackle here, kick a guy if he has to. And once he wins the ball, usually he doesn't know what to do with it. But in a sense, we can forgive him because he does so well. He does his job so well. He wins the ball. He marks a player. He makes sure that he limits attacking midfielders or attacking strikers. And that's all you need from him. He reminds me of Katsande in his prime. Basically he would win the ball, look around and just make the easy pass. And at Sundowns, Mvala doesn't need to do a lot. Just win the ball. Jali's there. If not, Domingo's there. In the middle, through the middle, Zwane is there if he's dropping deep. So he doesn't have to do a lot. Just has to win the ball and make sure, in this case, make sure that you cut the supply to a guy called Mohamed Sharif, who's one of the best players on the continent. And that's what he did. Gets a 10 out of 10 rating for that performance, because he was absolutely excellent. He was quality on Saturday. He proved why he's playing for Sundowns and why he's going to help Sundowns win the Champions League. I imagine I'd like to see more of him, especially in more the tougher games, because Sundowns now are going to qualify obviously for the group for the quarterfinal stage. When they go away, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mtobi Mvala there. Another player that super impressed me, Themba Zwane. I've seen Themba Zwane run games from that position of behind the striker or false 9, as it was on Saturday, so many times. When you give Themba Zwane that much space, he will run a football game. He's one of my favorite football players. That's why whenever I mention his name, there's a bit of a gush and a bit of a glow around me. He's as good as anyone in African football. He's probably the best attacking midfielder in African football. It shocks me and numbs me, and I'll do that in part 2, that he's not selected for Bafana Bafana. I'll get to that though. His performance on Saturday was absolutely class. And when you look at the opponent that he played against, that is just amazing. We need more of that as a country. We need players like that. Well, not players like Zwane because they're rare, but I mean performances of that nature from players where you grab a game by the scruff of the neck and you make sure it's your game. And you make sure that your opponent hates you for beating them into the ground. Now, that's what Zwane did on Saturday. He absolutely tormented Alhy. He pressed. If you check the highlights now, he pressed, he won a ball, he put through Pavlov Safranko, who hit the keeper. Whenever he had the ball at his feet, he was looking to create. He had the ball at his feet, he would have Morena running one side with Modau in the first half. He would have Shaluli and Lake running on one side. He had supplies. Domingo had a great game as well, running ahead of Zwane when Zwane dropped deep to get the position. The advantage of having that double 10 switching, false 9 switch like this, they gave Alhy problems. Sometimes they would spread, Shaluli will come through the middle, Zwane would be on the left, Domingo will be behind the striker. They were so good and so fluid in attack on Saturday, Sundowns. But Zwane was the key piece to that. And without Themba Zwane, I don't know what I'll be saying about Sundowns on Saturday. He was excellent. I'm still flabbergasted at why he's not chosen for Bafana Bafana. And the reasons for that flabbergast me even more. More of that later. So, to wrap up on the game itself, going forward, Sundowns fans should rightly so be excited. I wouldn't say get too excited, but they should be excited. One, because you've basically beaten a team that everybody wants to beat. You've beat them twice in a row. Now you've sent a message to the rest of the continent to say, this team means business. Equally, how Sundowns won both games? This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't like a last-minute penalty they win, or an own goal, or someone got a red card. These were meritorious wins. Sundowns outthought, outplayed, and they outsmarted their opponents, Alhy, in both games. That carries a lot of weight. That comes with a lot of cachet. And that earns you a lot of respect from the continent's best teams. I imagine there's a team called Raja Casablanca, who I think are looking solid. They probably eyeing Sundowns with one eye, saying those guys from South Africa mean business. And I think Sundowns just sent that message out. But to echo what Pitso kind of said, and I agree with what Coach Pitso said after the match in a post-match conference, where he said, well, Sundowns have invested a lot, and if they don't win the CAF Champions League, it'll almost be like a PSG scenario. Those of you who know me, I've always thought PSG are very overrated from the get-go. I've never been into it. I'm not going to be into it because when you watch the actual game, you don't see what they're doing. And Sundowns are in risk, for me, of falling under the same thing because every year they invest, but they keep coming back at the quarterfinal. This season, it's a bit different if you really, really watch Sundowns. They're a bit, as I mentioned, they're a bit smarter. They're very much tougher now. You can see how Zwane played on Saturday. They should tell you about the toughness that they have mentally and physically. And the coaches seem to be different in terms of their preparation. They are much more smarter, the coaches now. And I think that will help Sundowns go some way. Because I do believe that you need to have 2 ways of playing, or maybe 3, or maybe 4 ways to win, especially in a Continental Cup. Because sometimes the way you play at home will not necessarily reflect when you play away. Especially when you go from one extreme to another in terms of Southern African football. When you play Chiefs and Bo Pirates, and you play Zanaco, and you play a team from Zim, Chicken Inn, the football is so different. Petro de Lunda, someone from Mozambique. The football is very, very different. But once you cross the equator and you go to the Southern Hemisphere, or rather the Northern Hemisphere, it's a different style of football. It's a lot more physical, it's a lot more direct, it's a lot more technical. The North African teams, your Moroccan teams, Raja Casablanca, Wydad Casablanca, Zamalek, Alhy, Pyramids FC, whenever they get into a Champions League, those teams play a different brand of football. So you need to be able, as a continental team like Sundowns or Pirates or Amazulu, you need to be able to counteract that. You need to find a way within yourself to counteract what those guys are trying to do in order for you to win the CAF Champions League. And Sundowns, currently, I don't want to say they'll go win, but they seem to be on the right path in terms of the tactical aspect of it, the toughness. The only thing they'll be concerned will be going into that stage of the season. Can they keep doing it? That's the only challenge. But as I said, they've won. They've sent out a message to the rest of the African continent for me to show the people that, hey, this team means business this season. Let's see how far they can go. And also, from a neutral fans' perspective, you're like, well, if South Africa can have a team that wins the CAF Champions League, that can be good for our football, because our football in general has been going through a terrible slump for a long time. We need something. Last year, Kaizer Chiefs, people were proud. They went to the final and they got smashed. Sundowns will probably not get smashed like that. It will be rare to see Sundowns get smashed in that fashion. If they do get smashed, it wouldn't be that bad. I don't think so. God forbid. So it's good for South African football, and I believe Sundowns will make it to the semi-final. It's going to be tough, but I think semi-final Sundowns will definitely make it. I'm predicting that, just based on what I've seen, and also just seeing how they are now preparing for games, just what's changed from last season and the previous seasons before. You can see there's a change in mentality, there's a change in the tactical approach, which I like to see, because when they come back to play here in South Africa again, you'll see a different Sundowns from what you saw on Saturday, and that's how it should be. You can't approach each game the same way. Never. You can't win that. There's a bit of chase going on. So yeah, now let me just wrap up the video on a couple of other topics. Number one, Alhy came to South Africa on Wednesday or Tuesday last week, and they used Kaizer Chiefs facilities to prepare for the match. Now, Coach Mangoba took exception to that. He felt like it's a collaboration, something like that, between Chiefs and Alhy, and he spoke about patriotism. And he actually even went as far as say he thinks Chiefs would be spiteful. Now, I thought that was extreme to say Kaizer Chiefs were spiteful. I thought that was really extreme. I imagine that Kaizer Chiefs and Alhy probably spoke over the phone. Alhy, Pitso probably mentioned, look, if you want good facilities, I imagine Chiefs is the best place to go. And Alhy would have called Chiefs, and they probably paid them rent. So I don't know how Chiefs, maybe as a business deal, how has that been spiteful? I don't understand that. I don't think they were being spiteful. But what I would say that is that I have to lean in the direction of Mangoba when it comes to being the hosting part of it. when our teams travel to Africa, to the other parts of Africa, they usually struggle. I've read articles, heard stories from players and coaches, that when they get to that side, sometimes what they do is that the other teams make sure that there's no hotels that are booked, or all the hotels are booked out. So the club would struggle, the team would struggle to get a proper hotel. Like they would find that the only hotels that are available are 3-star hotels. And for footballers, that's not very good. Above that, they would struggle to get a pitch within the vicinity or the region of the hotel. So meaning they'll have to travel maybe 60 to 50 kilometers just to train. So if you're thinking about it, my geography isn't great, but it'll be like basically traveling from where I'm at to the next town. I don't want to mention towns. My geography is not good. So imagine as a footballer, you have to travel on bus 60 kilometers to the next town just to train. How difficult it is. And most of the time, those training pitches are not even quality. They are, kasotho lepoko. And for professional players to be training on lepoko, it's not good enough for them. They need proper, manicured, immaculate football pitches because injuries happen a lot. That's why most of us never made it in football. We got injured, So these types of things need to be avoided. So from that perspective, I have to say that Mangoba has a point in saying, why should we host them so nicely when they don't host us there? He didn't say that directly, but he was kind of hinting at that. And I thought about it. I agree. Kaizer Chiefs have the best facilities probably in the country and up there amongst the continent's best facilities in terms of the training pitches. Naturena Village is just an amazing football thing. I mean, people have come out from all over the world and be like, this is world class. So why should Chiefs give Alhy the best facilities in the country? But when Sundowns go there, it's not like Zamalek or Pyramids FC or any other of those clubs will welcome Sundowns with opening hands and say, come play Alhy, here's our pitch, go train. From that perspective, there's a question. I say that Kaizer Chiefs as a club didn't get anything from it. The Chiefs didn't get anything from it. So for someone to say they've been spiteful, for me, I can't say yes. They probably gained rent. I'm sure Alhy gave them some cash and hey, thanks for renting out your pitch for a couple of days, for allowing us to practice and prepare for the match. Thanks for that. But from a spiteful nature, I don't think they were being spiteful. They were just trying to, be good hosts. We're good hosts, South Africans. That's why we don't have land anymore. That's why we don't even have spaza shops anymore, because we're such great hosts. We love welcoming people from outside, that's why. So Kaizer Chiefs did the same thing. They welcomed hosts. They allowed them, welcome people, visitors, and they allowed them to use their spaces. It's a South African thing to do, But from that perspective, I think Mangoba was extreme with saying they've been spiteful. I just think maybe he should have explained himself better by saying, look, this is not how things happen when Sundowns go there or Chiefs go there. No one's going to be like to Chiefs. Hey. I mean, imagine if Chiefs go to Egypt and they play against Zamalek. Do you think Pitso's going to open his training facility and say, hey, Kune, Baxter, there's my field, go train? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Another thing. So there was another incident, to wrap up my video now. There was another incident between Sundowns fans and this time the Alhy bus. Apparently, it's apparent and it's apparent, it's not a fact. Sundowns fans blocked the Alhy bus from entering the stadium. Sundowns fans, some who were there, have gone onto the social media and said, no, what happened was the Alhy bus entered the wrong gate and it had to turn back and go enter the other gate because the gate that they tried to use was the gate where the fans were designated to use. And apparently there was also a funeral procession in Soweto, driving cars. So that just caused more havoc because, a funeral procession is a lot of cars. And there's a bus and there's fans trying to enter stadium. You can imagine the commotion. But Sundowns management has come out and said they're going to thoroughly investigate the matter, which I liked because Alhy launched a formal complaint with the match commissioner saying they were late for the game because they were blocked by Sundowns supporters from entering the stadium. Now, this happens. Unfortunately, this can happen a lot due to the fact that Sundowns supporters have a history of hooliganism and all other stuff. I don't know what happened. I can't say this for a fact. All I'm simply trying to do is decipher what we heard. One side of the story says supporters blocked Alhy. The supporters have come out on social media. Some of them have said, no, there was a misunderstanding. This was the designation of where we were supposed to enter as fans. But the Alhy bus entered the wrong side. Mamelodi Sundowns as a club have responded by saying they're going to work with the SAPS or SAPS to try and investigate the matter And once they find people who've actually blocked that bus, if they are, when once they have all the facts, they are going to take action against those people who were part of the people blocking the gates. And as I'm mentioning, Sundowns fans, unfortunately for them, have a slight history with these incidences. We don't have to go back too far. Last season, Pitso's first game back in South Africa, fans stopped the placards. They didn't stop the bus. They just had placards. Nothing hectic. Just had placards and singing songs and all sorts of, the terms were thrown around in Pitso's direction. Number one, I remember when Rolando Mokoena was coaching Pirates as an assistant coach, fan jumped over the fence, had a go at Rolani. There was a bit of a bit of handbags with Rolani. But outside of those two incidences, I really have to think back when Pitso was still coaching. They tried to, escort him out of the Sundowns fans love that. Tried to escort him out of the stadium so that he can leave, because they've escorted a lot of fans, right? Johan Nieskens, and others. They were well escorted by Sundowns supporters, but that's a long time ago. That's almost 10 plus years ago. So unfortunately for them, it follows them. And it's so easy for other people to say, yeah, they did this on purpose. They're jealous of Coach Pitso, this, that. It's so easy for other people to say that. But I'm glad that an investigation has been opened, and it must be opened. And I hope justice prevails. Either way, I hope Alhy get the answers they're looking for. I hope Sundowns finds out who's been doing these things. And I hope he gets killed, because whenever fans do this, it kills the image of a club. It doesn't just affect the fans, but it affects the club, because you're representing a club. You're wearing a certain badge of a club, and you're singing songs of the club. Then you go behave like that. And on television, for someone who's in Egypt, it's like, Sundowns supporters. Yeah. You say, so already the mention of, it's not Tabang, Wale Sundowns who's behaving like this, but it's Sundowns supporters behaving like this, which is not nice. And I think the club needs to protect its image. So I hope whoever, if ever there are guilty people, they get caught. Last but not least, again, 2,000 fans at the stadium. Great to see Coach Pitso after clapped hands to the supporters. They clapped hands back to show you that maybe it wasn't as, intense as people tried to make it seem. They shared a moment. Good to see the fans back. I maintain, however, there's still no science or medical sciences or whatever you want to call it that supports the notion that fans should not be in the stadium, or at least 2,000 or 5,000 fans. 2,000 fans at the stadium, no incidences. Nothing happened. Vaccinated fans, because I could see, and I know they were vaccinated because I saw the messages on the social medias that only vaccinated fans. And I maintain that position. They must open up the stadiums, but they must just tell people, hey, only for vaccinated people, just to protect ourselves against the virus. But why they're not allowing people back in stadiums? No rocket for me, no science for me. Still no science for me. And it's very more frustrating when you look around the world. Egypt had fans. Everywhere you go, they had fans. And now it's worse now, because when CAF Champions League comes for Alhy and Sundowns, all of a sudden we have 2,000 fans. What about Amazulu? What about Orlando Pirates? What about the derby? We've had, 3 or 4 derbies now without fans? Come on. And I like one more thing. It was fans. It wasn't media personnel with connections or fans with friends in media. It was fans. Your normal, basic fan. The man in the street, the woman in the street. That's what you want. You don't want, hey, we're opening for 2,000 fans. And only those tickets are exclusive to a few people who can actually afford them, or people who are in media with the right type of connections and have the nice names. I'm glad it was fans, your normal Sundowns fans that were there. With that said, part 1 is over. I'm about to do part 2. So yeah, man, thank you and bear with me.